Hello, this is Max Drake. I want to talk to you about this thing here and replicating some of its functions on this thing here. So this one here is a Stream Deck, costs about 300 New Zealand. I've talked about this before and there's videos on this. And this here is called MaxLauncher, and basically I will demonstrate this one here. Of some of the things that I find really handy is that I can just press a button and I can be in a different program, say this one here. I'll open up something or drop down onto the desktop, and if I press another button it will actually just open up another web page for me. This is actually starting up something else. So this is a really handy thing, is that it runs programs for you quite conveniently. Now if I go back to this one here, to actually close a tab, there's a couple of ways of doing it. You come up and you just click on the little X button through there and it will close that tab. Or if we just hit well up to a couple and open them up. Another way to close them is to use a hotkey. Now the hotkey for closing a tab on its own is Control+W. So I really love that. So I've been trying to replicate that particular function inside here. Now I've got one here where if I just go F, that's just going to open up another tab, and I'll let it open up first. And then I will just come back to there. So that Control plus space is the opening up this particular launcher. And if I type Z, it closes the tab. If I just come back and type Z again, it closes the next tab, and so on and so forth all the way through. Now that looks quite simple and it's a very easy thing to do, and you're suddenly thinking all I'm doing is just sending a Control plus Windows tab to that. But it ended up being a hell of a lot more complicated than that when I went through here, because doing that programmatically is not as easy as what you think. And what I'm trying to do is to run it through this particular program here. Now on this particular program, what you can actually do on here is that you can either add a file or a function, or sorry, a file or a folder. So that's all you can do. It doesn't let you do hotkeys. The Stream Deck will let you do hotkeys, but that's $300. This one here is a free bit of software that you can use. I think you can donate, which would be a nice thing to do. So how do you get it to run a hotkey? Is that you've got to put that hotkey into a file such that you're then pressing that file, and then it runs that file and does that. So initially I thought, oh, okay then, well let's just, I just want to step back at this point in time and just go back and just talk about hotkeys generally. Now when you run a script, now I've got scripts that are running and they're just sitting down here inside my tray. So they don't come up as a window. If I actually just do that, this comes up as Firefox as a window, but they don't. The little scripts just hide down here on their own, but I can run hotkeys. So I haven't got anything open at this point in time, and I'm going to go Shift plus Windows key plus D, and it pops up this box. And so this is a little script that I actually have, is that I can actually select a particular folder. We'll do that one there and go OK. And what this does is it copies that folder across to my network storage drive, so that I can then go and take that and go and put it on another computer. So when I'm working on a bit of code, I can move it onto a different computer so that I can carry on working at different times of the day. Now, I do find that quite a handy thing to do, but what I want to make the point of here, that is a global hotkey. I'm not in any program and it's working fine. Now, with hotkeys, or the AutoHotKey hotkeys, you can have them inside a program so that I can actually have another program here, and this is one I'm just going to open up a new file and just call it xxx.txt, and it'll come up here. Now one of the things I can do in there is, here's another hotkey which is just SD, and I can just hit space and it's doing a test expander type thing. So that's sitting in the background, it's listening for these things. So if I just go MSB and I type on that, it actually just converts that into another thing. The other thing that I can do, another hotkey, is Control+2. It does a date. If I do Control+2 and tap that twice, gives me the date in a different format, and if I do it 3 times, it writes it in another format, and if I do it in 1, 2, 3, 4 times, it will actually give me the time and the date. I've got the equivalent thing for that with Control+1, which does a whole lot of signatures that I can actually add to the end of the email. So I've got a whole lot of different things. So it's actually listening for these. Now these ones, if I actually just come into here and go Control+2, just hear this long fault happening because it's not sending it to any place that can actually accept text. Now I did that in code, but I could have done that in Notepad, in Notepad++, in Windows, in WinPad, in Excel, anything that actually takes text, this will actually do. In fact, if I actually want to change this text name through here, I can actually go rename that text. And at the end of that, I can do Control+2 and add the date onto the end of that, which would be quite handy. So as long as it's a field that will actually take text, some of these things will actually work in that. The text expander thing will work in that just as well. So therefore, the AutoHotKey things need to target. So they can target certain things and they'll actually act in some ways. Now, the other thing is as well is that I can actually say, run in these programs, but don't run in the other ones. So therefore, you can put ones on a blacklist. So if I've got something which I've got this one here which does this auto pop-up for folders that I can go and jump to. And it works in everything, apart from I've actually isolated in anything where I've got graphics programs, because a lot of the time my middle mouse or the wheel press down is usually a scroll or a pan function. So you need to disable that hotkey in there. So what I'm saying is that you can have a universal hotkey, but you can then start defining where and where it doesn't work. Or else you can actually have it in a specific thing so that it only works in one particular program on it, so that it works. So this is the variability of stuff. Now, when I was trying to do things to begin with, I ended up trying to just fire things. I was suddenly thinking I just wanted a global hotkey, and it wouldn't work in AutoHotKey. So I then tried using batch files and VBA scripts, and that didn't work either, and that got just a bit messy, and I thought I don't really want to go down that street. I then tried using Python, and that would actually, I tried a couple of libraries. One was PyAutoGUI, and that does a whole load of keyboard manipulation that you can do. And another one is called Keyboard. So that was another library, and both of them would actually send keys, and maybe on one or two instances they'd work, and then they would work again. I then also tried PowerShell, which is the big boy of the old DOS and the batch stuff, and that didn't work either. So I then came across a couple of articles, one, and I've only found it referenced in one place, it may need a bit more investigation, saying apparently the global hotkeys used to work in 8 and 7, Windows 8 and 7, but they don't work in, or they've been disabled in 10. And I found a document which was about RPA for a program called Blue Prism that allowed you to do global hotkeys. But they actually recommended that you didn't use them. They said you should actually get a window and target the window and then fire the hotkeys to that window. Now, the reason they would do that from an RPA point of view, because that's robotic process automation, is that if it goes onto different computers and somebody's already mapped that hotkey to something else, that automation would actually break. So therefore, their attitude is don't use it unless you have to, but it's there if you have to. You know, that's your last chance in a way. I wanted to use it first off, but I found I couldn't. If I just tried doing a little script, which is an AutoHotKey script that just did send or send raw, and it did the Control+W or something like that, it wouldn't blooming work at all. So what does? So we've gone through the negatives of the thing. So I couldn't get global stuff working. But what I ended up doing for this one here, I actually found this in on this particular Reddit article, is that somebody had it and then it suddenly broke, is that you actually activate your window, and instead of using send, you use ControlSend that takes the parent, which is this one here, and then it says the class. It ends up being a little bit more complicated than send, but I'm actually just sending the Control+W there. Now, it also said set a key delay, because what happens is if it goes too fast, and a lot of the programs are, it actually just it only sees one. It might see the control, it might see the W, but it won't see the control and W. So the set key delay actually slows it down so that you send one key, control, and then the W, so that it recognizes them. So that's all that script is, and that's the one that I'm actually using there to actually just use, if I just go into one, into there, and if I just use Control Alt, and then I just hit the Z key, it will actually close that program down. Now, following on from that, I can then use another one, Control Tab and X, which undoes that, which I find I'm using a lot more than I used to before. So that's good, but that's good as far as Windows go. But one of the things that I started to come across, which came me, is that basically what I want to use was call the hotkeys from my hotkey scripts. Now, in the hotkey scripts, they're all just little buttons down here, and if I hover over them, they tell you what the name of those scripts are, just all the way through. Now, I'm going to fire up another one, and that's this one here. And this was a script that I've actually compiled through here. So this is one called Time Capture EXE. Now, I'm just going to go into Task Manager. And Task Manager will show you what's actually happening. So I've got the Firefox as a window here that I can actually target through there. But what I've actually got as a background process is the AutoHotKey one through here. Now, if I just go and say, well, what are you? And I suddenly go to the details, and it takes me to the detail page. See, I've got 3 scripts running. And all I've got is a PID. A PID means the process ID. So every time you start another process, you see they've all got a unique identifier down here. Now, if I close one of these off, so let's just scroll so that we have them at the very top. And then I'm just going to Control-Shift-1. If I just go screenshot those ones there, I've got those ones there. Now I'm just going to go and close one of those scripts off. So sorry. If I look through at this point here and here, and I actually go and say Properties, all it says is this AutoHotKey. It doesn't say which process or which actual script is running. So that all I know is that it's got a unique identifier through there. Now, one way that I can actually do that is that I can actually shut a program down. So let's just hover over that. Well, sorry, let's just hover over that program there and see that it's the AutoHotKey command. Okay, then we're going to exit that. And if we go back, we're left with these other 2. Now, when I start it again, so I'm just going to go into 3 and go, what was that command? So D, we're going to start that one again. We can now, so we know what its PID is because it's got a new PID number, because if we just pop up that tool through there, you see originally it was called 8752, and 8752 doesn't exist anymore. That is now called 10648. So each time it stops and starts, it's got a PID. So that's a pain. How do you target something if it keeps on changing? If it's got a title, you know what you're targeting. So this is the second thing that I want to bring you down through here. Now, down at the bottom here, we have our Time Capture EXE. So we can target that. And again, with the Firefox, you see somewhere wherever Firefox is, we can actually target the Firefox EXE, which is what we're doing. So when we actually run this first script through here, we're targeting the name. And we say activate that as a window. So although this one here is got a name, we haven't actually got a window, but we can target it and we can actually send a hotkey to it so that we can actually run something through there. So that's one method of doing it. For the other ones, we can't do those ones. So what we've actually got to do with those is that we've got to find the process name. Now, I was also tested it out on this. It's a multiple ones that you've actually got. So I'll actually just do that close order command one. Here we go through here. So the first thing, so if we actually just go into terminal and we go into a PowerShell terminal and we type process, get process, you see it comes through and shows all the processes that are actually running. And if we go to the front of all of those at the very beginning, when it finally finishes, and there's an awful lot of them running, you will see all it's got there is, again, the AutoHotKey. So I can't target that within the Windows, but I can target it inside of AutoHotKey because there's a command called winget. And inside winget was a little bit of a script that I used, this one here, that actually said, okay, then give me the name of the program. I actually altered it slightly, as you see on my one here. I altered it so that I give it the name, and then it goes and gets the ID of that process, and then it loops through all of the open versions or the open processes of AutoThing until it finds the one that actually has the ID, and then when it gets the ID it returns the process ID. So that means once I've got that process ID, I can now target it and do something with it. In this case, there's a function inside AutoHotKey called process, and you can close it so I can shut those down. So that was the first bit that I did. I suddenly thought, let's just see if I can actually find the PID and close it and make that a reliable thing. So over time, each time I can actually just go and hit one of these and it will close that process down. So that was my first aspiration after so much grief with this thing. So I got that working and it worked reliable. So the next thing that I ended up doing was I suddenly said, well, okay then, now that I've actually got the PID, and I just ran that out. Now that I've got the PID, you can now activate based on the PID. Instead of, if you see a lot of these other ones, they actually go and ask you for the window class, AHthing class, and then you get that. And this is something which I'd find I would use Pullover's macro creator to actually go and interrogate things, and that gives you the PID, it gives you the class, it gives you all the other things that you want, which I find a very good useful tool to actually do. I prefer it over Windows Spy because I actually find the crosshair references I get from one is better than the other one. So on that one there, sorry, I was looking add to AutoHotKey. I can now activate that window, although it's a hidden window. This says detect hidden windows is on. That's another function inside here. And then once I've got that window, I can then send the hotkey to that window and then it'll activate it. And at this point in time, this particular one is being slightly buggy, but that's how I've done it. So at the end of this, it's and you know, it's been about a week of faffing around with this, of starting off with send raw, send input, send blah, 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 making all sorts of scripts. This is the final way. So the lessons learned from this is, one, you can't send global. I haven't been able to send reliably global hotkeys. So the first thing that you've actually got to do is that you've got to pull up the program that you actually want to send that hotkey to. So that's the first thing, is that you've got to go and find the window. And then this is the complication inside of AutoHotKey of a double thing. Of one, it's a hidden window, so it isn't like Firefox that just pops up. Now, I could have done a bit of a shortcut. I could have compiled all of those programs so that they could become exe, and then I could have gone for the slightly more simple method of, just activating the exe file. And then once I've got that, this wouldn't be a Mozilla window class, it would actually be an AutoHotKey window class, or whatever that is a theme of, and then I could control send to that thing there. But I wanted to go that extra step to actually go through and find the actual program that I wanted and be specific at sending there. Now, the reason why I was doing that, and I do just want to talk about this, is that I'm editing these programs all the time. Autocorrect I'm using. I'm always adding lots of other little text expanders. I've suddenly been using PowerShell, so I now have a little text expander for PowerShell. I don't have to type it all out each time. I can just type PSS and hit enter, and it comes through and does that for me. Now, I find when I'm actually when I'm writing an article and I'm going to repeat the thing all the time, like AutoHotL, I've got something here for AutoHotKey that I can actually, instead of writing out in full all the time. So I find text expand I'm doing. Now, if I'd compiled autocorrect, I wouldn't be able to, I'd have to go and add something inside the script file, and then recompile again. And then so there'd be a lot of compiling. And my other two main programs, I've got a couple of test programs, which is my email one, or email double tap, which I'm constantly adding other little functions to. Now, if I don't use those functions, or they're useful functions, but I don't use them all the time, I then move them across into this command one, which I can just hit with the caps key, and it brings up all the ones that I want. Now, if I just type 3, I can now run that particular one there, or I can abbreviate one. So this is a place where I can store ones I may or may not use that often, and I ended up with a different trigger to actually activate those particular programs. So, and all they're doing is they're just going and calling that file and actually firing up. So in some ways, this is very similar to this, but I prefer the visuals of this. This reminds me so much more of the Stream Deck, and it's got 10 across, 3 down, so that's 30, and then it's got 10 tabs. So it's got 300 tabs that I can actually play with. So I find that there. Plus there's the hotkeys, there's the function keys across the top that I don't actually use. Plus I've got the search thing through here, which I can actually just go AHK, and it'll filter out all of the AHK ones that I've actually got to do with AutoHotKey or Commander or something like that. So I've got the search button there to actually quickly find things that I want, or if I want something pure, in here. So this one would be a list, and it doesn't matter how long the list is, as long as I've got an abbreviation for it. It's just D, and then as I go through, it's filtering all the time in that particular way. Oh, blast, I've actually just... No, I don't want that. I think I've done something bad there. I specifically went for a slightly more awkward thing. Now, there is an article on this that I've written. Blast, it's now stuck on top. That I've gone through and discussed this whole issue of all of these processes. Now, at this point in time, I don't think this is the be-all and end-all of it. This is just how I've been able to get these particular functions to do with web browsers and to do with my AutoHotKey scripts, so that I've got them running. These are other little scripts where I'm just actually running other hotkeys, and I'm just still debugging some of those as well. Again, because this is an exe file, I've got a more simplistic one for closing the exe file. So if I just type, I've actually got the little time clock open there. So if I just type that and just type G, it should close that down and it disappears. So that one, and it uses the more simplified method rather than cycling through all of the hotkey ones, because it knows exactly what it's targeting. So that can be, so I've tested all of these things, and I'm very pleased with how they're working. So focus on a window. If you've got so once you've got the window up, you can actually start sending scripts to there. Now, again, one of the issues that I actually had, and the reason why that I've got that ControlSend on the close tab one, is that one of the things, if I'd have actually just sent, and I'd have just taken that out there and just put send, and that was Control and W on that one there. What I found, if I'd have actually run this one here inside Firefox, it would have closed all the tabs. For some unknown reason, it ended up adding a shift on the end of it. And this is what I found was quite buggy, is that when I was actually using this to test all of these ones out, if there was any scripts or things or any other programs that had a shift plus whatever the hotkey I was doing, whether it was Control W or Control 1 or Alt 1 or something like that, it would go and trigger off all of those other things. So even by rewriting the hotkey as Shift Control W, it still didn't work. So I don't know why some things need the ControlSend, some things don't. You know, I think I'm still confused by a lot of things. All I've been able to do is make some of these things work, and I am quite pleased about this. So the choice is, you know, I've got this playlist on free productivity tools. Now, it's really focused on people who are just generally just trying to get through the day-to-day stuff of their tools. And what I would actually say to them, if you don't want to code, use this. If you do want to code and you've got a very tight budget, then use this. But then you'll actually have to go into actually testing out the code and getting something that actually works for you. As I said, it's taken me a week to do this, and it's been quite frustrating. And I don't feel I've got as far forward as where I'd wanted to be. And it's just a lot of the times I really didn't know what I thought I was working in one environment doing something, but then I found I was in the whole Windows environment, and that caused complexities. And I don't have an understanding of there, but all I found was I have a little bit more understanding of processes now, and it just tells me that there's an awful lot that I don't know. But I found a way forward. I found a method to actually allow me to not only open programs, but to do other things when I'm in the programs. I can close them, I can go in and edit them. Now, another thing as well that I thought might have been a dead easy thing to do was to actually, just take a copy of a program there. We'll take this one here. We're just going to copy it and we're going to paste it. And I thought early on, what I can actually do is that I can actually just do an argument, and the argument can actually be the Windows key, which I think is the hash and the 5, and I could then, maybe either close that particular program down. So it's now closed that program down, and then I could reactivate it with that assignment in it or argument in there to actually add that trigger on there, and that didn't work either. Or I did get it to work on one or two instances initially, but then it didn't. So at the end of the day, it wasn't anything reliable. These ones do tend to be a lot more reliable, and there's still one or two slight buggy things in there, but I think I've got the process down. I know what I'm doing now, that and it might be the fact that I'm inside this loop and I'm taking information out. So I'm still playing with some of the, just tidying up that code to actually get it work. This one with the process closed works no problem at all. The one where I'm sending the hotkeys to it, I'm having a couple of little glitches on. So I hope that's been of interest to you. If you found it useful, please give a thumbs up. If not, Okpanyaha. Thank you very much for watching. And that's Control.